Hi, this is Miss Michael from Parkview High School, and you're looking at the press box in the Parkview High School Stadium. And today's video, I'm going to be discussing cell size, surface area to volume ratio, and homeostasis. And I'm sure you're wondering why I'm showing you a picture of the stadium. I want you to imagine that teachers have to conduct class in this stadium. Just say your standard biology class. What would be some issues that the teacher would have if the teacher had to teach from the press box and the students were all spread out over the field? What kind of issues do you think that the teacher might have teaching? Would it be an efficient way to teach a biology lesson? Imagine that we're doing a lab and materials need to be distributed. I'm thinking that if I were to conduct a lab out on the football field, I might need this little gator for me to distribute materials to students if students were spread out. Papers being collected, that might also be difficult for students. They'd have to run to the press box to turn things in, or again, I'd probably have to get on this gator to go around and exchange papers. So there's a lot more energy needed for me to conduct class in this large space. If I'm exchanging materials with students, exchanging papers, lab equipment, trying to get instructions to different locations, it's going to require more energy. I'm going to need that gator. I might need a microphone or just a really loud voice for that day. And the same is true for cells. Cells need to be smaller in size because it's easier for that exchange of materials. It's a lot more efficient for a cell to be smaller, just as it's a lot more efficient for me to conduct class in a smaller space. Now, there is a little mathematical issue with all of with cell size, and that issue is surface area to volume ratio. Now I'm going to switch to a video, and they're going to do a little demonstration. We did this demonstration in class with agar cubes.
With a demonstration. This block is made of agar, a seaweed extract, a bit of the base sodium hydroxide, and a pH indicator. This pH indicator, phenolphthalein, is this very nice fuchsia color when it's exposed to a base, and it turns clear when the pH turns acidic. I've cut cubes of this agar into 4 different sizes. The biggest is 3 centimeters on a side. The others are 2, 1, and 0.5 centimeters on a side.
So we did this little demonstration in class, and these agar cubes have that pH indicator, and so he's going to go ahead and show you how they collected data in his class.
These cubes into a dish of vinegar, a weak acid. Watch what happens. In 6 minutes, the tiny cube has lost its fuchsia color and turned completely white. The other cubes still have some fuchsia inside, and the percentage that's still fuchsia goes up with the size of each cube. In other words, vinegar diffused into 100% of the smallest cube's volume.
Okay, so here you're seeing that the smallest cube, which represents the cell, and the vinegar represents the nutrients. The smallest cube in the same amount of time has diffused 100% of its materials versus the larger cubes. The larger the cube, the less, the lower the rate of diffusion that is occurring. You can see that smaller cube has 100%, and the largest cube, they've only diffused materials 19% of the way of that entire cube.
Reached only 19% of the largest cube's volume. Let's get our heads around what's really going on. Diffusion is the movement of molecules in a fluid, a gas, or a liquid, from where they're more concentrated or bunched up to where they're more spread out. It's how this drop of food coloring is spreading throughout this flask. You don't have to stir or add energy. The random movement of the food coloring molecules will lead them over time to move apart from one another. When we put our agar cubes in the vinegar is more concentrated outside the cubes than it is inside. So because there's nothing from stopping the vinegar from moving in, the vinegar diffuses from where it is outside the cubes to where it isn't inside the cubes. The vinegar is diffusing through the outer surface of each cube, and we can quantify the amount of surface by measuring the surface area of each cube. In this table, I'm going to list the surface area.
Okay, so what he's going to show you, and I'll speed up the video so you can see, is that there is a mathematical reason why small cells have a higher rate of diffusion. And it's because the smallest cube has the highest surface area to volume ratio. And you can see that in this little clip here, that the smallest cube, it's like a fraction of a centimeter, okay, is small. It has the highest surface area to volume ratio. And that's just the relationship between the surface area and the volume. If you look at the relationship between the surface area and the volume in these larger cubes, as the size of the cube increases, the surface area to volume ratio is going to decrease. And that's true of cells. Cells have to be small because this high surface area to volume ratio allows diffusion to happen at an increased rate. I'm going to go ahead and skip to this is how it applies to different organisms. The surface area to volume ratio. He's going to give you some examples of larger organisms and explain to you how different adaptations these organisms are going to allow them to maintain homeostasis, and also kind of falls in with that whole rule that an organism is going to need more surface area to volume ratio in their cells.
Filling up with waste that can't diffuse out. Tininess gives cells a very high surface area to volume ratio, and that's why cells are small. All right, so what's with the flat ears on the elephants? Well, elephants are mammals just like we are, and like us, they maintain a constantly high body temperature. We mammals like our cells to be warm, but too warm is dangerous because excessive heat can reduce enzyme function by denaturing enzymes. That can kill you. Because elephants are big, their bodies have very little surface area relative to their enormous volume. And this makes it very difficult for heat to diffuse out the elephant's body.
Okay, so he's saying that it's a large organism, a large elephant. Okay, the elephant has a large volume, and so what is going to allow this elephant to adapt is a feature.
So think about this in terms of the long, slow process of evolution. As the ancestors of elephants evolved to grow bigger, they needed other adaptations to improve their ability to allow heat to diffuse out of their bodies. And that's what the elephant's huge ears do. In the thin flap of skin that makes up each ear, blood can circulate, and the heat in that blood, being close to the surface, can diffuse out of the elephant's body. That's the adaptation, a flat sheet of tissue that makes heat diffusion easier. To simulate this, let's cut a flat sheet of our phenolphthalein agar and put that in vinegar. Because it's flat, this flat sheet has a very high surface area to volume ratio. So it's very easy for the vinegar to reach the entire volume of this sheet in a relatively short time. Summary, Big flat appendages with their high surface area to volume ratio are often adaptations for radiating heat into the environment. And how about this flatworm? No heart, no lungs. How is oxygen getting to all of its cells? How is carbon dioxide getting out? Because these animals are flat, they have a very high surface area to volume ratio. So you can assume that oxygen just diffuses from the surrounding water in and carbon dioxide from the body cells out. And what about the huge size of whales? For whales, who often live in cold water, the problem is the opposite of the problem that elephants face. Elephants have to deal with overheating. Whales have to struggle with hypothermia, with heat loss. So think about the fact that in water that's a nice 80 degrees, a human being can become hypothermic within a couple of hours. How do whales survive lifelong immersion in ocean water? Size is a big part of how whales adapted to the cold stress involved in living in water. Whales are huge. Huge things, just by the math, have a very low surface area to volume ratio. That means that the heat inside a whale's body is effectively trapped inside. There's no way for it to get out. Remember our cubes. Large size is bad for diffusion. So just by evolving large size, whales decreased their surface area to volume ratio. This made it easier for them to maintain their body temperature. It was a selective advantage. Genes for size got passed on because of surface area to volume considerations.
Okay, so in conclusion, folks, cells have to be small because of diffusion rates. And the surface area to volume ratio is important. So the higher the surface area to volume ratio, the easier diffusion can happen and the smaller the cell. The smallest cells are going to be those that are going to help maintain homeostasis, and they're going to allow diffusion rates to be appropriate for organisms.